Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week, as you can see, is a soft pastel landscape painting or sketch. There's sort of two reasons why I wanted to do a soft pastel landscape this week. The first is this piece of paper. So I found this piece of paper under a pile of old sketches and sketchbooks hidden away in a dark, dusty corner. The piece of paper is at least 10 to 15 years old. Probably more like 15, and you can sort of see it's a bit dusty and scratched and a bit rough around the edges, but I didn't want to just throw the piece of paper away, so I decided that this week I would try a little soft pastel landscape. Not that I'm trying to pretend to be an expert with soft pastels or anything. Of all the different media that I use, this one is the one I have the least confidence with. I kind of got back into doing the soft pastels, I guess about just over a year ago, but I haven't really been able to do as much practice with them as I would have liked. Although I have lots of soft pastels from many years ago, I don't have the paper to practice with. So there's basically two types of paper that I'm aware of anyway with soft pastels. The first, it has a very soft surface. It almost feels like felt. It's quite soft, which helps to grab onto and hold onto some of that pastel dust. Now, I like to paint in layers, lots of layers. Unfortunately, with that type of paper, you can only really get maybe 2 or 3 layers before the tooth of the paper starts to fill up. The second type of paper, and this is an example of the second type of paper, it has been treated or coated with something. So in this case, it's an acrylic gesso produced by a company called Art Spectrum. Now this gesso, when it dries, and you can get it in lots of different colors, when it dries, it has a very porous surface. It's not rough like a sandpaper, but it is quite porous. And all the little holes and things in that surface help again to grab onto and hold on to the pastel dust. And you can build up a few more layers with this type of paper than with the other type of paper. There's also some pastel papers that are more like a fine sandpaper. Again, that rough surface just holds on to the pastel dust. So the main problem for me was just the cost of this coated paper. It's not cheap. So basically that's why I haven't had as much chance to practice and produce videos with soft pastels. So as I say, for that reason I wanted to take a bit of an opportunity just to do a bit of practicing with the soft pastels. The other reason I was sort of inspired to do this week was during the week I was looking at some paintings by Alfred Sisley. So Alfred Sisley was one of the original Impressionists, although he's maybe not as well known as, say, Claude Monet or Renoir, Degas or people like that. But he did take part in the Impressionist exhibitions, including the first one before they were even called Impressionists. And he often went out painting with Monet and Renoir, and they went out into the countryside and painted outdoors, which was quite a revolutionary idea at that time. He painted mostly in oil colors, but he also did some pastel paintings, landscape pastels. Unlike Monet and Renoir, Alfred Sisley did actually stick with landscapes pretty much through his whole career. Monet went off, of course, and started doing water lily paintings and things like that. Renoir, of course, sort of gave up on Impressionism and landscapes and went off and started doing portraits and lots of naked ladies and things like that. But Alfred Sisley stuck with painting landscapes. Unfortunately, unlike the other two guys, Alfred Sisley's paintings didn't sell for that much during his lifetime, Therefore, he lived pretty much in poverty his whole life. In the very early days, his father gave him an allowance. Even as an adult man, his father was still giving him an allowance. His father was quite a successful businessman. He was in sort of silk business, buying and selling silk in France, although he was originally from Britain. However, during the Franco-Prussian War, I forget exactly when that was, 1870s, 1880s, something like that. Alfred's father's business went bankrupt, and so that was the end of the allowance. And after that, Alfred had to make his living from selling paintings. He died in 1899, I think it was. 1898, something like that. It was about 6 months after his wife had died. He died of cancer. But it was Claude Monet, who stepped in and paid for Alfred Sisley's funeral. So, in some ways, maybe it's a sad story about living in poverty and things, but in another way, he lived the life that he wanted to. He wasn't like some of these other artists at the time who were off drinking and womanizing and things. He had a quiet life. He seemed to be devoted to his wife and things. And although he lived in poverty, I guess maybe that was a choice, and they were happy enough with that. As I say, his paintings are maybe not as well known as some of the other Impressionists, but if you've never really seen them, they are worth taking a look at. And as I say, he did some pastel paintings as well as the oil paintings. And I've always had a bit of a sort of soft spot for Alfred Sisley's paintings. So anyway, that was also part of the inspiration or the motivation to do some pastel painting this week. And as you can see, my pastel paintings are not fantastic, but they are somewhat, I guess, impressionistic. Lots of little loose, broken marks on the paper. And although they're not fantastic, I enjoyed the process of making this little painting. And as I've said many times before, I think one of the main things with painting is enjoying the process. If it's a bit of a chore, if you don't enjoy it, it's kind of what's the point in doing it, I think. So no matter what the final results are and whether other people like it or don't like it, kind of doesn't matter. It's the main thing is, do you enjoy the process? I also do think that when you're getting started with whatever medium that you want to use, it can be useful to sort of copy or be inspired by certain artists or certain art movements. I think that can help. With this painting, I also decided to frame the painting. I found an old frame, so I have a backing board and a mat, and decided to actually frame this painting. It's not something that I often do. It does help with the painting. It does make it look better, I think, when you frame it. So this is the painting in a frame on the wall. The frame looks a bit rough around the edges as well. It's actually supposed to look like this. I bought it off, I think it was Etsy, maybe a couple of years ago, and I never used it, but it was advertised as, I think, distressed effect, which I guess is a fancy way of saying it looks a bit rough. But I don't mind that. I quite like that sort of aesthetic. But anyway, yes, I was glad I had a chance to do a bit of soft pastel painting and make a video and tell you about Alfred Sisley. If you've never come across him, I definitely recommend going off and finding some of his paintings and taking a look, especially if you like Impressionist art. Okay, well, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and hopefully see you in next week's video.